The cake is back. Well, I've done the 3 Big Mom specific videos. Now this video is going to be about the history and the layout and the government of Totland, in regards to just like all of that stuff, because with a bunch of the other islands and kingdoms that I've talked about, if there's enough of a history that we know about it, I kind of did it as a separate video, or like I did with Alabasta, I combined that with like what we had learned about Nefertari D. Lily. So in this case, I will be talking about Totland in regards to, I am going to go over all of the different islands and the information that we are aware of about them. I have like stat sheets for a bunch of them, who, what's the food that's made on the island, what's it in charge of, who's the, minister of the island, that type of a thing. And of course the history of, Whole Cake Island itself and Totland overall, which a lot of that was covered when I talked about Big Mom for her past and for the Totland itself video, so I won't be going too heavily into a bunch of that, but I will touch on it. And then after this video, I was trying to decide what I wanted to do for the next set of this, because I'm not done with Totland, but I'm like, I'm not doing a video where I go over all of her children, all 85 of her children. I'm not doing that. Other people have done that already, and we really haven't been given that much more information that could be used about them. Beyond like the speculation that, like, Perospero may have died at the end of the Wano arc, depending on, after how he was defeated by Nekomamushi. So that's a possibility, but we really don't know because we don't have confirmation on that yet. Given the cover page series that just started in the manga, there's the possibility we might get some information about Perospero or Big Mom or Kaido. Like, if we see their devil fruits have been reincarnated in Wano and they're found in Wano, then that gives us our answer there. But until then, I'm not really going to do too much more speculation about that. I did, however, decide that I am going to do videos about specific children. Perospero, as much as I don't necessarily like him, he is a huge part of the story, and as the eldest of Big Mom's children, he is quite involved during the Totland arc and into the Wano arc in that regard. So I will talk about Perospero. I will talk about all 3 sweet commanders in regards to Katakuri, Cracker, and Smoothie. I will talk about Pudding, and I am going to talk about Brulee, since all of them are pretty major, majorly involved throughout the course of Totland. And then there are a couple of other ones that I'm going to talk about simply just because I like them. And I'm going to do them in birth order and such, and I'll go from there. As I said, I'm not doing ones about every single one of the children, because some of them is literally, this is their picture, this is their age, this is the sibling group they are a part of, this is if they are a hybrid, and this is if they have a devil fruit, and if they're the minister of something, and that's about it. We really don't have that many other ones to go with that. But going into this, so Totland is, of course, the archipelago within the New World that contains about 35 islands, and all of them are food themed somehow because of Big Mom's soul power and Stroisen's cook power, where he has the ability to like turn stuff into food and stuff like that. And over the last, 60 some years since Big Mom, was taken to the island that became Whole Cake Island, that's where the sheep's house was, the second sheep's house was, and everything happened with Mother Carmel and the children vanishing. And then Stroisen basically raising Lin there. There is, this huge amount of, history in that regard. And that's where the majority of stuff has happened. We know that Big Mom herself would leave Whole Cake at various points in time along with Stroisen in order to go and be part of her own crew and be part of Rox's crew during that time frame that we are aware of, all the way up until the end of what happened at God Valley. And then Big Mom went back to Whole Cake Island and back to Totland at that point in time, and really probably started to rule over it as a queen and take up her own position as like a Yonko type of a thing during that time frame. We don't know the exact timeline for that, but that's a fairly accurate setup there. And of course, during all of this time frame, she's been having all of her children and probably been bringing other people in under other islands under her protection / control and such like that. My thought is that generally, probably what happened is that her and Struyson found other people who were strong enough pirates or strong enough people that they were willing to serve Big Mom. From what we see in the flashbacks for Katakuri and Brule, while her children did stay on the island, stay on Whole Cake and some of the other islands during that time frame, Big Mom didn't seem to have the amount of respect that, or they didn't have the amount of respect that probably would have been deserving to Big Mom's children should she have been the queen at that point in time, which I'll go over a bit more when I talk about like Katakuri and Brule in their videos, and even Perospero a bit in his, given what we see through some of those flashbacks, with, you know, all of them bullying Katakuri and everything, with all the other civilian children and such, you know, bullying Katakuri and everything. But what ends up happening is, of course, you know, they build up Totland. Pretty much the history is that, you know, 63 years ago, that was when Lin Lin, along with the other members of the Sheep's House and Mother Caramel, were moved to the island that would eventually become Whole Cake, by the Giants after Lin Lin's, you know, hunger cravings rampage, during the winter solstice. That was, you know, the fasting and everything like that I went over in her video in regards to her childhood. And they move there, and of course the whole incident happens with the giant, you know, cake that they made for her, and then all of the others vanished, and then she somehow has has Mother Caramel's devil fruit power, and Struyson appears, and, you know, he starts to kind of push her towards certain things. I mean, there is basically the whole thing of, like, if Struyson hadn't shown up, she probably still would have discovered that she had, like, the soul powers and started to animate the trees and the flowers and stuff like that, like we see her doing in the flashback. And that probably still would have, like, scared off the Marines. So she may still not have been captured by the Marines at that point in time. But the argument could be given that if Struyson hadn't been there, then there's the possibility that she just would have starved because she didn't really have the ability to cook for herself yet, and she probably would have run out of food pretty quickly. Then again, the argument also could be made of, like, well, Luffy kind of was trained and had a, well, trained is a light way of putting it, and how to survive in the wild, but that's from Garp just, like, chucking him into the jungle and being like, here, survive. Big Mom didn't have that type of training. But, you know, so eventually that's what happens, and they eventually end up building up the island that would become Whole Cake Island, and of course that expands out into the other parts of Totland as bringing all of these other islands within this archipelago underneath Big Mom's control and protection, and with her becoming the queen of Totland. Now, as I stated in previous videos, Totland itself, while it is a nation, is not recognized as a nation by the world government. It is not a member of the world government. And, you know, I can't blame them. I mean, this, you know, their ruler is a queen who is directly opposed to the world government, is a pirate, and by a technicality, the kingdom itself does, to a degree, embody what the celestial dragons are against, this concept of, like, all of the different races being equal. And as twisted as Big Mom's dream became, it did start off as a very pure thing about wanting to be able to create this home, this country, this world where people can, regardless of what their race is in regards to being a snake neck, long arm, giant, long leg, third eye tribe, whatever, you know, fishmen, merfolk, blah, 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 blah. Insert all the other races that we are aware of from One Piece for the most part, that they are equal with everybody else and equal with just, like, regular humans. That even though they are a different quote-unquote race, they are still humans. And Big Mom did have that concept, and she, you know, that was a good concept for her to have and such, but she, you know, over time that dream got twisted a lot more into wanting to have them look and, you know, be the same size as her. They can all look different, but they all have to be the sime size as me, and that's where the whole gigantification problem comes into play, in regards to why she hired Caesar. One of the other things we know is that about 35 years ago or so, Smoothie, Citron, and Cinnamon, who are her 3 long-legged daughters, and Smoothie is one of my favorites out of all of the Charlotte children. I just love her design, and she's just fun. I like Cinnamon's design too, and I'll talk about Citron later because she's one of the governors of one of the islands. But what ends up happening is they are born in Totland, and so that means it existed about 35 years ago. So that's at least some part of a timeline there. We also know that at some point Roger managed to sneak his way into Totland and make his way all the way to Whole Cake Chateau, or wherever Big Mom was hiding her poneglyphs at that point in time, and get a rubbing of the copy of her road poneglyph and everything, which of course he used to be able to find his way to Laugh-Tale. We assume probably that, you know, during all of this time frame, she's been, you know, having children, gathering up husbands, blah, 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 going through all of that, bringing in all of these different races, except for the giants, you know, and the Lunarians, because King's the only one left, or at least the only one left that they are aware of. We also know that, you know, she built up her communications network and spy network and everything like that, her information network and all this stuff, and that probably increased what was going on in Totland. We also know that during this time frame she has been, you know, just building up her crew and building up her family and everything like that. And by a technicality, as I mentioned before, if I had to choose between living in Big Mom's territory of Totland and living in Wano, I would still live in Big Mom's territory, because as long as I wasn't on an island that Big Mom tended to be on very often, I would be much less likely to have to deal with any of her hunger rampages. And, you know, the whole leave her life thing of, you know, you can give up, you know, you give 1 month of your life every 6 months, or whatever the equation ended up being. You know, 1 month of your lifespan every 6 months, and you get to live in, to a degree, relative safety and such. I would still take that over having to live in Wano and having to deal with all of the poisoned food and water, and just having to deal with Orochi. And you know, it seems like you could get Big Mom's children to be much more amenable to you if you at least have the ability to contribute to what's going on around you, to contribute to helping with baking or cooking or artistry, to help with different things like that, or have a skill that could be useful to them in regards to keeping Totland this, you know, kind of dreamlike country. Now, admittedly, I wouldn't necessarily want to live in either one, or under either Yonko. I'd rather live under like Whitebeard or Shanks type of a thing. And there's some world government affiliated nations like Alabasta, or, you know, a couple of other ones here and there that I wouldn't mind living in. But there's a lot of other ones that I was like, I don't want to live there. I don't want to live there. I don't want to live there. I know what's going to happen. Type of stuff like that. Like, I wouldn't want to live in the Germa kingdom, which will end up being like the next set of videos that I do while I talk about Germa. So we see a lot of that throughout the course of, you know, the building up of the island. She built up the Seducing Wood. She built up all of these different themed islands and everything like that as part of the history of Totland. We know that at some point in time, Pedro and the Nox pirates made their way in, and everything happened with Zeppo and Pedro, and then Pedro got sent out after Zeppo died and everything. And we know that at some point in time, Big Mom was able to bring minks in to live within the community, because a lot of them, you know, one of them recognized Pedro and everything. We know during the time skip, she had interactions with the Kid Pirates, the On-Air Pirates, the Fire Tank Pirates, and the Fallen Monk Pirates. So she had interactions with 4 of the Supernovas. 4 of the Super Rookie crews during that time frame. We know that Kid managed to cause probably a fair amount of damage to some stuff in order to get his hands on one of the poneglyph rubbings for the road poneglyph, we know that Beijing married into the family by marrying Chiffon. We don't really know too much about what happened to Eru or what happened to Apu during that time frame. Probably attempted to fight against someone, got his ass kicked, and went off simpering and ended up joining Kaido, and then causing problems for Kid and Hawkins in that regard. And then in regards to the Fallen Monk Pirates, we know that Erouge probably ended up fighting against Cracker. I believe that is determined. And he managed to, or not, yeah, he managed to defeat Cracker, but ended up coming, Katakuri saved, or no, he fought against Snack, he fought against Snack, and then from there, Cracker showed up and was able to defeat Erouge, and Erouge left. They presume that Erouge is dead, but we know that that's not true since we've seen him post that battle. And then from there, we pretty much get into everything that happens in the Totland arc, the Whole Cake Island arc, with all the Straw Hats showing up, with everything happening with the Germa, and with Sanji and Pudding's wedding, and just everything that happens there, and Luffy fighting Katakuri, and dealing with Big Mom, and the wedding cake incidents, and everything else like that. Which, pretty much most of that I went over in the Totland video itself, where I talked about, like, Big Mom in Totland, that I pretty much touched on all of that stuff in regards to, like, how many problems that caused. That the one thing that I will add is that we know that from what we saw in the cover page series for the Germa Double Six's Emotionless Excursion, and then what we saw very recently in one of the episodes in regards to what happened with Aokiji, with Kuzan, and with Van Augur showing up and fighting Cracker and then capturing Pudding. We saw that very recently in the anime for how that would have gone down, and that caused quite a bit of problems. And now they have to, now we're kind of waiting to find out what's going to be the remnants of the Big Mom Pirates crew's response to, them capturing Pudding. Because from what we've seen, Katakuri and Brule very, very much value their siblings, and they will probably want to go after Pudding and try to save her, which could lead to an alliance with the Straw Hats, which could have been something that was slightly hinted at in regards to, like, what happened with Film Red, for, how that kind of went, for them forming an alliance with, kind of roughly a very, very tentative, very small, very short-lived alliance with the Straw Hats and with Shanks, in that regard. By technicality, the Marines, because of Kobe and Helmeppo being there, type of thing. But so we get some of that throughout the course of the end of it, where we might find out what'll happen with that next. Don't know. Can't really do too much other speculation on that than what I've already done. So moving on from the history, we have kind of the layout for how the islands are set up. So the layout is that Whole Cake is the center island, and then it is subsequently surrounded by all the other 34 islands. And Whole Cake Island is basically the capital of it, and that is where the Whole Cake Chateau is, and that is where Big Mom lives, and that is where Sweet City is on the island, and that's where the Seducing Woods are. Supposedly that's where another version of the Sheep's House is, that she may have kept a hold of. But since we didn't see it in the current timeline, we don't know exactly if it's still there or not, or if she used it to make something else. She may have enough sentimental value for it that she didn't want to destroy it. Don't know. And that's basically where, like, the central administration is like Whole Cake Island. And, Big Mom's the queen, so she's, like, the one that is, fully in charge of everything. Her word is law. Bring me wedding cake, bring me croquembouche, bring me whatever the heck food I want. And I will admit, Whole Cake Chateau looks like a freaking awesome place to live. I would not want to live within the Whole Cake Chateau or within Sweet City, just given how everything happens there, and that's probably the main place she tends to go on a rampage the majority of the time. And yes, I would not be immune to her soul powers, because I would just be like, nope, I'm terrified of losing my soul and dying. I would not have that resolve the way that Jinbei does. It just adds another level of how much badass Jinbei is. But then again, the majority of characters in One Piece are badass compared to me, because, you know, I'm me. Um, in that regard, for like that type of bravery and such. And we know that so many of the islands and so many of the surrounding areas around the islands are actually have been affected by the fact that there are so many different food islands and all the different homies and such like that that Big Mom has created over the years. Not necessarily directly from her soul beyond Zeus and Prometheus and Napoleon up to that point in time, but ones that were made from probably, you know, gathering up the little bits of souls that are like, you know, the tithing thing, the whole, you know, leave her life setup that she does. And then like puts those souls into different things, into the food, into the flowers and the trees and other plants and animals and, you know, different things like that. One question I do kind of have about that is we saw her take Zeppo's soul, take his lifespan that would have been his remaining lifespan. And what, you know, we saw her take that, and did she absorb that into herself? Did she put that into a homie? We never find out, because as far as we're aware, while the souls that are within the homies by technicality do still retain some of their memories, because we saw, you know, putting use like her memory flash ability on them to make them like remember bits of their past life, they don't necessarily seem to keep the personality of the person who they came from. I mean, Big Mom's homies might be a bit of a different story there, given the fact that you know, Zeus is like this glutton that goes from like romance to romance the way that Big Mom does. But Prometheus is exceedingly loyal to Big Mom, and that shows off her part of that aspect. And Hera does the same thing, and same thing with like Napoleon and such. But we don't really see that from any of the other homies, that, because like the only one that we could technically draw a correlation between is like Nitro, I think, who is like the little jelly homie that jelly slime whatever homie that like Pudding has. Like you could draw a connection between like that and Veggie, because like he's like, you know, has like the mafia hat, the fedora, and like the cigar and everything like that, the way that Veggie does. But I don't know, because we don't know who all the other souls come from directly. But of course, because of all of the different homies and such like that, and the way that the islands are set up, the geology and set up around the islands is very interesting, because they have like the cotton candy snow that falls, and they have like the rivers of juice and such like that that like flow into the ocean and like mess with the ocean currents and stuff like that, and different things along those lines that can be affected by like what happens with on the islands and everything. So in regards to the islands and the administration, so Big Mom is the queen, as I said, and then she has a supreme authority in Totland underneath her. Whole Cake Island is a little bit different than the other islands in the fact that it is not governed by any of her children specifically. It is actually governed by like a group of officials who we actually see when some of the stuff when Big Mom's going on her rampage, but also we get a little bit of that when they're trying to decide how to deal with some of the different issues that are going on with like the Straw Hats being there and the Germa, and how to handle that stuff. And while her children to a degree are involved in some of those decisions, and while she herself might be involved in some of them, it mostly seems to be left up for the day-to-day decisions, left up to the different just like administrators of that island. So from there we go to all the other islands, but I just wanted to touch upon a few things for Whole Cake. So Whole Cake also is like the base of operations for the Big Mom Pirates. And as I said, they have the Whole Cake Chateau in Sweet City. And the Whole Cake Chateau itself, as I said, just looks like an amazing place to live. I'm like, my entire place is made of food. This is amazing. Although everything talks. So that would be a bit of a, okay, the charm is lost on me and it's gone to creepy at this point in time. It's like Alice in Wonderland on steroids, basically. And acid, basically. And what ends up happening is, of course, Everything happens with Whole Cake Chateau and everything along those lines. On the island, they also have Sweet City. They also have some other location for the Sheep's House, as I said, and they also have the Seducing Woods. And of course, the Seducing Woods are designed to be like this defense mechanism where anyone who wanders into the Seducing Woods who is not already aware of how it is designed to work, or who is not allowed into the Seducing Woods, like Big Mom's children, or probably some of the, like, Peckhams or Baron Tamago probably would have been able to go into the Seducing Woods and probably would have been fine, simply because, like, the Woods probably, like, know that they're members of Big Mom's crew. But beyond that, like, maybe regular civilians going into this forest may not have as much luck, but, like, the forest isn't necessarily going to try and, like, attack them. But, like, the Straw Hats coming in with, like, Carrot and everything like that, that's a different story because they, by technicality, are enemies in an invading force coming into Totland. So that makes sense why the forest would definitely be attacking them. Also, it's part of the plan in that regard. So that way they can get captured, and so that way, you know, Pudding can marry Sanji, and that wedding can go through and everything like that for that. So, going into all of the different islands and the said ministers for each island. So, and these are just in alphabetical order because that's the way that they were on the Wikipedia. So we have 100% Island, which is governed by the Minister of Juice, Smoothie. And 100% Island seems to be basically in regards to, given the fact that it talks about juice, is probably just like where they mostly take care of their juice and everything like that. Like, that's, you know, one of the big contributors to, like, what they take care of there. Also, that goes along with the fact of, like, Smoothie has, like, her juice fruit that she's able to use to, like, you know, wring the juices out of fruits and objects and giraffes and people, and herself, and that type of a thing. So, like, that's basically what's in charge of there. We don't really get to see the island, unfortunately. Some of these, it's like, we don't have the island, what the island looks like for the most part, so I just came up with something that's like, this is juice, or this is whatever the heck other type of food, and here's what it looks like. Next up, we have Biscuit Island, which is governed by the Minister of Biscuits, Cracker. And the island itself, we don't actually end up seeing the island directly, but we do see, like, a little sketch of it for, like, a map setup. And it's just like, it's themed after biscuits, which is of course very appropriate for Cracker, given the fact that he has the biscuit no mi, and is able to make his biscuit soldiers and everything like that. And as are several of the other islands, it's part of, like, the Charlotte siblings' secret route in order to make their way to Whole Cake Island, so that way they know how to navigate the islands, but that doesn't mean that everybody else does. I would assume that they have some for like the citizens who are used to, you know, who, like, move the items from, like, one island to the next, or, like, keep, you know, like, the trade system going within the kingdom. Probably they have, like, their own way of, like, getting from one island to the next, but this is specifically the route that the children use to go from one island to the next and to get to Whole Cake Island in that regard. I would assume, you know, Biscuit Island, they probably just you know, that's where they make a lot of the biscuits. End of story. Biscuits and crackers and things like that. Next up, they have Black Island, which is actually has nothing to do with the color black. It's in regards to, like, black tea, because it is the minister of the island is the Minister of Tea, Dos Marche. Don't ask me. I don't even remember what they look like right now. I made the page. I don't care. It's not one of the ones I'm familiar with. But that's probably where they grow and cultivate, like, all of the tea and stuff like that they use throughout the islands, and everything. They probably have lots of different kinds of tea, just because that seems like Big Mom would like a variety of that stuff, I would assume, or her children would probably like a variety of that stuff. Next up, we have one of the major islands that we see a good chunk of during the story. We have Cacao Island, which is, of course, one of the more outer islands that surrounds Totland. And it is, of course, well, the former minister of the island had been Lola, excuse me. But since she ran away, the position has technically been vacant and they have been working on trying to fill it. And by technicality, Pudding holds the position as a moment as like a potential candidate for it, just because she is like exceedingly good when it comes to chocolates and baking and stuff like that as well. So she is one of the ones that is kind of in charge of the island, I would say, although that's quite a while to leave the position open. But you know, it's Big Mom, it doesn't matter. We see that this island specifically, it's one of the ones where we get a pretty good look at the island. It has chocolate themed stuff everywhere. And of course, that's where we see Chopper and Luffy running around and everything like that, and trying to devour everything in their path, and trying to devour Pudding's cafe and all of that stuff and everything. So it's like, it's one of the ones where we get like a good chunk of what we see. It's also on that island is where Pudding and Sanji and Chiffon, along with a bunch of the other chefs, remake the wedding cake and everything, so that way it can be made to calm Mama down and go from there. I like the design of Cacao Island. It probably would be one of the islands that I would like to live on. But I would also be interested, you know, I don't know which island I would want to specifically live on, but there's a good number of them that I wouldn't mind living on. It was just like, how far am I from Big Mom, and how likely is she to come here and be hungry? Okay, I'll go live on a different island now, type of thing. Also, we don't know how much is like, how easily is it for you to move from like one island to the next? Like, we don't know exactly. Never stated. Next up, we have Candy Island, which is one of the innermost islands within the archipelago, and again is, you know, part of the siblings route. The minister of the island is the Minister of Candy, Perospero, who, as I stated, is the eldest of Big Mom's children. He himself is pretty involved in the story, in you know, Totland arc and into Wano. But I don't think we ever end up getting to see the island, but it makes sense that he would be the Minister of Candy, type of a thing. I would assume this island is just focused on making sure that they have all the different candy that's needed to satisfy Big Mom and to satisfy other people. It is never, I don't think it's ever stated if they do a whole lot of trading with islands outside of Totland. But we know that if Big Mom wants something from another island, she's just probably just going to send her children to take it from the island and possibly just, you know, destroy the island. Yeah. One thing I didn't mention that I wanted to point out in regards to the actual history of Whole Cake, in regards to like the island itself that becomes Whole Cake Island. And I did mention this in the Big Mom video where I talked about her childhood. The island itself seems to be abandoned when like Mother Carmel and the others show up there, but Cypher Pole seems to know where it is, as does like the Marines, in order to find it. But I do believe that I stated that I think that island may at some point in time have been the previous location of like one of the population extermination games that the Celestial Dragons did, because that still would have been within the time frame that they probably would have been doing it, since it was pre-God Valley. Admittedly, we don't know if they've done any since God Valley, but at the very least, pre-God Valley. And it may have just been that like it was a location for it a while enough ago that the island itself has managed to recover. It's just that nobody has come to live on the island again until Mother Carmel and the others show up there. And maybe she knew about the island, and that's why she took them there, because like, oh, I don't think the government's going to come here for a while, so I think we'll be fine, and go from there. But back to this. Next up, we have Cheese Island. So probably don't want to live there if you're my sister and you're lactose intolerant, or anyone who's lactose intolerant. So Cheese Island is under the governing power of the Minister of Cheese, Montdor, who Montdor is actually one of the ones that I'm going to end up talking about in the videos, just because like I like his design, I like his devil fruit power, and he's just kind of fun. I like him. So I will end up talking about him for one of the different videos. But you know, this island, pretty obvious. They're the ones that develop all of the different cheeses. You want like cheddar, pepper jack, Colby jack, provolone, blue cheese, just Alfredo, just well, okay, Alfredo is not a cheese, that's a piece of sauce, but like, you get the idea. Parmesan, you know, provolone, just, you know, any types of cheese, this island is where you're going to get it. This island. And I don't know if there's a specific connection there. I'm like, I don't know, but it's that's where they get their cheese from. I like the design of that. Next up, they have Cutlery Island. So it's themed after cutlery, and the person in charge of it is the Minister of Cutlery, Mascarpone, who is one of the I believe he's one of the snake neck children that Big Mom has. That it's like him and his sister, and they're the ones that like have the spears and arrows and stuff like that we see throughout that. They're not part of the same batch that would have been like Amande and her siblings, her sisters. They're from a different batch several years later. But we don't know what the island looks like, so I just figured, well, it probably just looks like it's covered in like cutlery of like, I was gonna say swords. Swords are not cutlery. Of like knives, forks, spoons, different things like that. I'm like, well, I mean, like the islands are all themed around food, so it makes sense that they would have like an island that is specifically designed to be able to make the best types of cutlery for eating or making. They may also be in charge of making the different types of not just cutlery, but other cooking utensils, and maybe even production of ovens or different types of, cooking materials in regards to like pots and pans and cookie sheets and, pie pans and like so many other stuff like that. Rice cookers, I don't know. Just anything else that like would be needed to like, you need this to cook something, we can make it on the Cutlery Island and then ship it to your island and you can use it that way. That could be something that might be how they do it. Like we see that they have like these huge, when they're making the wedding cake, we see that they have these huge versions of appliances that they're using in order to make the wedding cake. And those might be something that like had to be specially made, or definitely would have been specially made. And maybe that's like was made on like Cutlery Island. So that's probably part of that there in regards to how that would be designed. Next up, we have Flavor Island. Not really anything here. We get that it's governed by the Minister of Essence, Saint Mark. I don't remember exactly which one he is. I don't remember. I want to say that he's, actually, I don't remember even which one that he is at this point in time. He's not one of the major ones, so I really don't remember. But again, Flavor Island, I would assume that they are the ones that tend to deal with, I think I said that they tend to deal with like seasonings and stuff like that. Again, some of these are just like off the cuff, however Oda wanted to design them for like, yeah, this island is this, and this is the minister. Fills in a blank, but it doesn't tell us a huge amount of information. The Flavor Island might just be in regards to making sure that they're the ones that make all the different seasonings and spices and stuff like that, possibly. Unless I have something else down here that's like mentioned in that, but I don't know. Next up, we have Fruits Island. And Fruits Island is governed by the Minister of Fruits, Compote, who is Linland's second child and eldest daughter. And she's the one that has like the giant bowl of fruit on her head that is supposed to be a reference to like the Carmen Miranda hat. If you don't know who Carmen Miranda is, Google her. She was famous for wearing a hat made of fake fruit. Or possibly real fruit. I don't know. And dancing. I don't know why that was her gimmick. But I would assume Fruits Island is just, again, it's like where they grow all the different fruits and stuff like that. I don't think there ends up being like a vegetable island, so it may just be they also grow like vegetables there too. That just be like where they grow like their produce and stuff like that, but mostly fruits. Maybe part of that is Linland's thought is like, well, if we grow as many different types of fruits as possible, maybe then as like someone with a devil fruit dies, like even if there's someone from our crew that dies and has a devil fruit, or if they die anywhere around us and they have a devil fruit, then maybe the devil fruit will get reincarnated on the island if it's like, well, that's the closest of that type of fruit, so that's where it's going to grow. And then every so many days she has like like compote, like has people like comb through all the different groves and areas trying to see if they find any devil fruits. And then like they take those back to Big Mama and be like, here, Mama, we found this devil fruit. I don't know. Probably not, but I mean like that wouldn't necessarily be a bad strategy. Type of way of like being able to do that. So they have Fruits Island. From there we have, and I'm going to mispronounce this, and I apologize, Funwari Island, which in the English is Fluffy Island. And this one is actually was governed by the Minister of Puff Chiffon until she left Hotland with her husband's son and Beiji's crew with the Fire Tank Pirates. So Fluffy Island and Fluff and Puff and that type of stuff. I'm assuming that ends up referencing back to like, because we see how Chiffon is this amazing baker and how she's able to make this amazing like frosting, cake frosting, blah 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 blah, that is like so light and fluffy that it's like trying to escape out of like this, pot that they're trying to hold it in when they're making the wedding cake. That she's just so amazing when it comes to that stuff. That she's probably like the person in charge of, or the island itself is probably in charge of like taking care of different types of frostings and fluff and different things like that, I think, for the other islands. Maybe. That's about the only one I can give you there. Next up, we have Futoru Island. And this one is governed by the Minister of Tasting, Mobile, who, if I'm remembering correctly, he is one of Big Mom's long-armed children. He's part of the group that has Marble and Miyakyu or something like that in it. That are some of the other ones, and he's the eldest of them, and that's about it. We see him during everything that's happening on Whole Cake Island, and he has like a pinstripe suit. I don't really know. But the island itself, the meaning of the island is Futoro means to put on weight. So I'm like, okay, he's the Minister of Tasting, so is his job to, like, if someone has like new recipes that they want to submit to be like become recipes all over the different islands or something like that, or like to copyright a recipe or something like that, do they like go to him and be like, here's the recipe, I made this, and this is the item that I made based on the recipe, like a version of like Top Chef or something, here's the recipe, here is like my cake or my hamburger or my pizza or my whatever that I made based off of this recipe that I made, and here's this, and it's giving it to him, submitting it to him for like tasting to see if it's something that like yes, that is quite good. I will give you a permit to be able to use this and sell it, or whatever the case may be. And we will distribute the recipe to other shops and such like that, or, however the case would be. That would be like one of those issues where it's just like, okay, how does that work? I mean, like, I might be putting more thought into this than Oda did. He just might be like, tasting, that's related to food. We'll put that on an island. So, I don't know, maybe. Next up, we have Ice Island, which is, was, don't know yet if he's even still alive, governed by the Minister of Gelato, Moscato. Now, Ice Island we see it in the show, and it's clearly based off of ice cream. And Moscato is the one who at the beginning of Totland's arc ends up getting like his lifespan ripped out by Big Mom when she's on her hunger rampage, and then it gets put back into him in at least some amount from whatever, because we see him later and he's alive and in somewhat fighting condition. Again, whether or not he's still alive is left up for debate. However that went. Also, it's never stated in the story whether or not Big Mom's children and in-laws have to pay the lever life tax. I would assume probably at the very least not her children, because that would be like a way of like detrimental to like her fighting force. Because she's like, no, my children are immune from this. They don't have to pay the lever life tax because their loyalty is to me. And if they try to leave me, I'm just going to kill them anyway. But like we don't know if like Beiji's crew or the Sun Pirates or whatever are like immune to having to deal with that. Don't really know beyond that. Um, but Ice Island is where they make all of the ice cream and popsicles and gelato and like so many different other types of that. As far as I'm aware, that's probably what they do there. I wouldn't mind living on this island, although my minister may have been killed very recently, type of a thing. Also, I just like experimenting with ice cream. Next up, we have Jam Island. So, jam or like preserves or stuff like that. Jam, jelly, preserves, that type of stuff is probably what's involved here. The minister of the island is the minister of jam, Decawis, who I think is Big Mom's son. That looks like he's like got like devil wings type of a thing. But we don't know like what his species would be, or if, like devil or bat type wings, or if like he has a devil fruit that allows him to have bat wings. We don't know. It's never stated. We've never gotten that information from him or about him. But he's the minister of jam on the island, and Pedro makes the comment that when they're sailing through, because it's part of like the Charlotte family secret route to get to Whole Cake Island, that because they sail through that area at night, and because of the rivers of juice that run into the ocean, that run into the sea, it actually kind of like turns it into this like gelatinous thing that's really hard to get through, and we see them having to like try to like thaw and melt the jam as they're trying to make their way through at night, which is kind of fun. It makes the water look gorgeous, and well, I mean, it would still technically be going into like salt water, so it may not taste very good, but I don't know. Maybe. I don't know. I'd at least taste it, and I'd be like, yeah. I've tasted salt water. I was like 5 or 6. I was in Florida. We had gone to Disney World, excuse me. And then we went to the beach one day and I tasted salt water and I did not like it. Ew, runs away from the water. But yeah, so there's that. So we get a little bit of information about that island. Next up, we have Jelly Island. So, I think this is supposed to be a reference to Jell-O, as opposed to like jelly, as in like a PB&J, like a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I think this is a different type of jelly. I think this is supposed to be a reference to Jell-O, given the fact that the one who is in charge of it is the Minister of Augur, Canton. And by augur, not Van Augur, different concept. Augur is a substance that you put into Jell-O or into other types of food in order to use it to like stiffen up. So that's like when you're making Jell-O and you like mix in a certain type of a component into it that's like part of like the recipe, and then that's why when you put it in the fridge, once you put it in like the mold that you're trying to put it in or whatever, you put it in the fridge and then you pull it back out, and like you can dump it out and it just stays Jell-O. But it stays Jell-O and it just like shifts and shakes and everything like that, as much as it wants, and it's really not going to get any type of damage to it, or it's not really going to melt or turn back into a liquid unless you like put it in the microwave or something. The thing that makes it do that is auger. So that's what it's designed to do. And I think I think the island is supposed to be a reference to like Jell-O instead of like jelly, in that regard, for like how that's designed, because I don't know if like auger is in actual jelly, like is in like a PB&J or not. So, and I know that like jelly and Jell-O has, and like jams and stuff like that have like a different concept, and like between like I even know between like the UK and the US that there's like a bit of a difference there, and how those are like portrayed to a degree. The dog is asleep behind me, or she was until I said something. Next up, we have Kibo Island. So I don't know what Kibo means, but given the fact that it's governed by the Minister of Yeast, Marnier, I would assume that it has to do with like yeast and stuff like that, because like yeast is very important when it comes to different types of baked goods, like breads and different stuff like that, where you need the yeast to be able to make the dough rise. That might be something that's very important on that island. along with some other stuff that would go along with yeast. Um, from there, so not really too much there. Next up, we have Kimi Island, who is governed by the Minister of Eggs, Citron. Citron is one of Smoothie's triplets, one of her direct siblings, along with a Cinnamon. See, I said I was going to mention her. And she's in charge of eggs, of the Minister of Eggs. So I would assume that that the island itself, Kimi Island, is in charge of like different types of eggs that are needed for large eggs, small eggs, chicken, ostrich, whatever other types of eggs that would be needed for cooking and baking and different things like that. That's probably like where they're supplied. I do know that when we're kind of being introduced to some of Big Mom's children, that when they're all out gathering supplies for like the wedding cake, that they go to an island and they do end up taking eggs from that island and like slaughtering the citizens, I think. But that's not Kimi Island, because that would be kind of a ridiculous thing. It was like, we're going to go and send troops to our own island to slaughter them. Why? I don't think Big Mom's quite that callous in that regard, but like gathered, eggs from that and stuff like that. But we don't see too much else of, we don't really see the island, but I would assume it probably is shaped like different eggs. Like maybe it looks like it's Easter on the island all the time. That's about the answer I can give you. Next up, we have Kinko, not Kinko's, Kinko Island, which is in the English is Pantry Island, and it is governed by the Minister of Finance, Noisette. Apologize if I mispronounced that. He's one of the rare single births that happen, or so. So the way that it's designed, or the way that it means, this is Kinko means safe or treasury in Japanese, and Oshimuna, which I think is another reference to something else that's used for reference to the island, means don't be stingy. So, and he's the Minister of Finance, so I would assume that maybe he is in charge of keeping track of where all of the different funds and finances and, money and berry and everything like that that's going on within Whole Cake, within Totland. So let's see, within Wano, that's different. Within Wano, that he's in charge of that. Which would be a very important thing, because like even though there's probably like ministries of trade or something like that set up between all of the different islands, that way this recipe calls for cheese, but it's needed on this other island, so we need to make sure that cheese gets delivered there and this other stuff gets delivered here, and we have to make sure that everything is in order. Also, for like just Big Mom's finances in general, probably she's got to have different dresses for various things, and I'm quite certain she put a lot of thought into how much all of the different tea parties she has are going to cost her, and such. So there's that. So we don't get too much in there, but I would assume it has to do with some of that stuff. Next up, we have Komugi Island, or Wheat Island, which is governed by the Minister of Flour, Katakuri, one of my favorites. What can I say? He's handsome. And I just like him in general for his personality. And of course, Komugi Island is, of course, means wheat in Japanese, and so it's like this wheat flour pun is like what's going on with it, in regards to it being, the island name. And I would assume just like that's where they work on, growing all of different wheats and to make different types of flour and such like that, because there's like all different types of flour within the world in general, because there's like, well, there's regular wheat flour, and there's various kinds of wheat flour. There's like almond flour. There's like cauliflower flour, which is, I think, a new thing. And there's like a bunch of other different types of flour made from like different types of grains and things like that, and nuts and stuff like that. And that might just be those types of things are like what Katakuri is in charge of as the Minister of Wheat, as well as being one of the sweet commanders. So Katakuri, Smoothie, and Cracker all have a lot of things that they're supposed to be in charge of between being sweet commanders and being ministers. So yeah, there's a lot there. Next up, we have Liquor Island, which is, again, part of the, I don't think it's part of the routes, but it's like located in, like close to like Cheese Island, I think. And it is governed by the Minister of Liquor, Guto. Um, and so I would assume that that's where they ferment and all of that stuff for any types of alcohol or any types of like wine, scotch, brandy, different things like that would be for drinking, but also because a lot of that stuff is used in cooking as well. And also just like alcohol itself can be used in cooking for various things. Cooking sherry or different things like that can be used. So I think he's probably in charge of a lot of that. For that setup, which would be an important thing because wines are very important based on like how you're going to have that with like what types of dinners and foods. And Big Mom herself may not pay that much attention to it, but I would assume to like if she's having guests or like for the tea party or stuff like that they want to have like these very interesting, beautiful wines that taste amazing and stuff like that. And given the fact that it's oat cake, they probably have like a lot of different types of interesting types of wines and scotches and other alcoholic types of drinks and beverages and mixes and things like that. Like, we saw Smoothie using her ring out powers, her, juice powers to, make like a drink out of a giraffe or a drink out of, a woman who stabbed someone so many times or, like a boulder of lava. Stuff like that like there might be some alcohol mixed in there somewhere along the lines. From there we have Loving Island. It's governed by the Minister of Love Cornstarch. I got nothing. I'm like, is this the island that's in charge of Valentine's Day within Totland? Is that what this island does? It's like, we got to make sure all the Valentine's Day cards are ready and that everything's ready for this and blah, 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 blah. Is this where all the different couples come for like a romantic getaway? Is this where Big Mom comes for romantic getaways with whatever husband number blah, 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 blah that she's had over the years? Is that what this is? I don't know. I got nothing. I'm like, that's what I have. I don't have anything else there for that. Next up, we have Margarine Island. And Margarine Island is governed by the Minister of Butter, Galette, who actually is going to be another one of the children that I end up talking about in the other videos, just because I just like her and I find her interesting. I just like her. I like her. I don't know why. I find her very, I like her design and everything. So Butter Island, Margarine Island, all that setup definitely is something that is in charge of being able to make sure that they have all of the different, butter that's needed for so many different types of recipes. And there are varying kinds of butter because there's like different butter with like different fat content and different things like that would be, salted and unsalted and, different types of butter that would be needed for that. So that's probably something that she's in charge of there. Also, she herself has the butter fruit. So she herself is able to like create and control butter. And manipulate it and everything like that. So that's a good fit for her. Next up, we have, probably going to butcher a bunch of this, and I'm sorry. We have Melange Island, and it's based off of a French word, because I guess what it is. It is governed by the Minister of Meringue, Broyer, who is the twin sister of Brulee. And Brulee herself is in charge of the seducing wood, so she's not really mentioned here, but she herself is in charge of the seducing wood, so that's what she's in charge of. Broyer is in charge of, like, meringue, which I honestly had to look up how to pronounce the word, and then it's just like, oh yeah, I know what meringue is. Do I? Not necessarily. I know that it's, like, generally used as, like, a topping on different types of baked goods, and it can have, varying different types of flavors to it, but I really don't know anything else about it. Or itself can be used to coat baked goods or something along those lines, or coat candy or nuts or different things like that. I really don't know that much about it, but that's the bit that I know there. That's what the island is like, that's probably where they make a bunch of that stuff. Which you would think would fall under like fluff or something like that from what like Chiffon would have been in charge of, but I guess not. This video is just about to hit an hour. Didn't realize that it was going to be this long. I jabbered. Oh well. And I'm only in the ends. Next up, we have Noko Island, which is governed by the Minister of Whipped Cream, Opera, which is, or it was, considering he might be dead at this point in time, governed by Opera, who he himself has the devil fruit, the Kuri no Mi, that allows him to create and control whipped cream. Noko itself means like strong flavored or thick, so that's like a reference to like whipped cream and stuff like that. So that's just probably like the main thing that they produce on the island. I don't know. That seems like a very small market distribution thing that you could have there. Next up, we have Nuts Island, which is governed by the Minister of Nuts, Amande, who's one of the other ones I'm going to talk about in the other part of the series, where I talk about some of the different children, just because A, I love her design, B, her name is very similar to mine, and I can be a little bit favoritism there. So Nuts Island, we do actually get to see Nuts Island when Big Mom goes on her rampage setup, because that's one of the islands that she ends up attacking, and that's also where like Luffy is running around outside of the Mirror World, where he has Brûlée, and he actually uses Brûlée like a shield against her sisters, which is kind of funny. And Nuts Island gets a lot of stuff destroyed on it because of Big Mom's rampage at that point in time, so I think it's fairly close to Whole Cake Island. And it is part of the little secret sibling route and everything like that to get to and from Whole Cake Island and everything. As I said, that's probably just where they're in charge of growing and, taking care of and blah, 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 all the different types of nuts that would be needed for varying types of, baking and food in general and stuff like that, baking and cooking and all of that stuff. We see giant peanuts, although I think it's been said peanuts are not actually peanuts, they're like legumes, which is I think closer related to like a bean, but I could be wrong. We have a bean island coming up in a little bit, but not quite the same thing. Also, on the islands, it seems that the people who live on the island seem to have like some type of like themes to their clothes based around what island they're on. In some cases, because I know on Nuts Island we see a lot of different people wearing like peanut hats or different things like that, so there's that. Next up, we have Package Island, which is governed by the Minister of Transport, Nestorte. Again, I apologize, I don't know. And Package Island, we do get a little image of it. It just looks like it's like a package. So I would assume, he's the Minister of Transport. So I would assume that he himself is in charge of making sure that like stuff is transferred from like one island to the next correctly, to make sure that it's properly packaged and stored to be taken to a different island. That's like, oh, all of this yeast needs to go over to this island, so we got to make sure that it's transferred there correctly, or this chocolate needs to get from Cacao Island to, Fluff Island, so it needs to be, make sure that it's kept at the right temperature, and, these crackers from Biscuit Island need to get to, blah, blah, blah island, so they can blah, 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 whatever is needed for that. I would assume that that's probably the setup there, that like he's in charge of that, or even in regards to being able to ship stuff outside of Totland, transport it to other places outside of Totland. Like we know that they bring in candy from the saltwater candy from Fishman Island. So there's possibly a connection there where like maybe that's where it comes first and then it gets sent to Big Mom or possibly distributed slightly to some of the other islands, depending on like, certain siblings like this candy and stuff like that. So there's probably some connections there to what he would be in charge of. From there we have Pie Island, which is governed by the Minister of Pie, Compo. They have pie on the island. That's where they make all the pie. That's the only answer I could give you. 3.141595. That's as far as I could ever remember with pie. I had to put the pie joke in there. What can I say? But I would assume that just the Pie Island, that's just where they make so many of the different pies, and that would involve having to have ingredients from a lot of the different islands, depending on what type of pie they're making, whether it's a fruit-based pie or whether it's a meat-based pie for like, I'm about to say shepherd's pie, but that doesn't actually involve like a pie crust. It's a different type of a thing. Pot pies, different things like that is probably like what they're in charge of. And then, send it to different islands or whatever Then we have Pori Pori Island, and this is governed by the Minister of Beans, Daifuku, who's one of Katakuri's, direct siblings, and has like the genie fruit. I'm like, I rub my belly and I have a genie. I'm like, okay, whatever, weird. And Pori Pori is the Japanese onomatopoeia for crunching, so that's just the reference there. I think we see Beans Island like in the distance at some point in time, but we don't really go there. Just like it's covered in beans, which is like, well, that's apt. Next up, we're almost done. Next up, we have Potato Island, and Potato Island is themed after potatoes, as is quite obvious, and it is governed by the Minister of Fries, Snack, who is one of the former Sweet Commanders, one that got defeated by a Rouge. And we see the island a little bit at one point, just like from like an outside shot. I don't really think we end up going into the island all that much. But it just looks like there's like a huge like thing of like French fries on the island and potatoes, and that's probably just where they grow so many of their potatoes. I actually learned something interesting about potatoes that I can throw in here. So there was an article that I heard about on the radio it was on NPR. That was about the fact that potatoes, varying all different kinds of potatoes, are actually one of the least environmentally damaging vegetables or foods that can be grown, because they don't really cause any type of damage to the environment, or very little types of environmental impact to the environment where they are grown, even if they are not native to that area. So they're one of the ones that is the least impactful in regards to like damaging, which is a good thing. So take that or leave that whenever you eat a potato, or have mashed potatoes or French fries or potato chips or whatever the heck other varying hash browns, tater tots, whatever other varying types of potatoes that you eat. So there's that. Next up we have Rukumitsu Island. Apologize. And that is governed by the Minister of Honey, Flampe, Bitch. And so the way that it's kind of described for like how this comes out for like translating purposes is Rukumi means seasoning in Japanese, and then that's kind of a reference to like the name of the island, and then Nachimitsu, which is the name of one of the towns on the island, is the Japanese word for honey. So it's also like a reference to like Hachi is a reference to 8, and then Ruku and Nana are references to 6 and 7 respectively in Japanese in regards to like how they're pronounced and written and stuff like that. So I really don't know how that has anything to do with the island, but like a honey island, or seasoning type stuff, I would assume that would just have to do with like I don't know, that's where they have all the bees from Totland, and they're the ones that make all of the honey and everything like that that's needed for varying types of things, for candy and for cooking and for whatever the heck else, and toppings and other types of seasonings, I guess, maybe, that are needed. I don't know. That's what we get there. Almost done. Next up we have Senshugoku Island, that is governed by the Minister of Mix, Shibaust. Again, a lot of these, it's just like, I don't recognize the name of the kid off the top of my head, so I'm not really going to worry about it. And I was just like, I have no idea what this would be. I'm like, the only thing that I could think of was like is this where they make all the pancake and stuff like that types of mixes that are needed? Pancakes and waffle and biscuit mixes and cake mixes that are needed, and then they ship them out to the other islands. And that's where they can, blend everything together and make whatever it is that they're trying to make. Is that what this is for? I don't know. That was the only answer I could come up with. So I don't know. That's what we have there. Next up, we have Tenaga Island, which is governed by the Minister of Seeds, Totto. He's the one that looks like a pumpkin head. Like he has a pumpkin head and looks like he could just be a homie brought to life, but he's not. He's one of our sons. And there's two references here. Ten, Tane, or Tane, in Japanese means seed, or is a pun for seed. And then the island itself could be a reference to the island of Tengagashima, which is a real island that is south of Kyushu as part of the certain area in Japan. That's the only answer I have there. I don't have anything else there for that. Next up, we have Topping Island, which is under the ministry of the Minister of Toppings, Tablet. I would assume what is he just in charge of like all of the different sprinkles? I don't know. It's like some of these are just like moving all of the food from one island to the next kind of makes sense because like man cannot live on chocolate or cheese alone as much as some people would like to try. Potatoes, yeah. Man cannot live on all of that alone. But like I'm just like I think Oda's stretching here a bit for like what they're in charge of. I don't know. Next up we have Unique Island, which is governed by the minister, or was governed by the Minister of Design, Praline, who is of course the half mermaid daughter of Big Mom, who married Aladdin and is a member of the Sun Pirates. She left with the Sun Pirates, so she's a former member of this. She's no longer in charge of the Island of Design. And the best I could come up with is that as the Island of Design, for like the unique island and design and everything like that, are they like was she in charge of making sure that all the different things look aesthetically pleasing in regards to like like the design for the wedding cake, like this has to look perfect for Big Mom, and anytime they have like parties or anytime that they're trying to figure out like the best way to make food look amazing, like is she in charge of that? Is that what she does? That's like the only answer I could come up with for like what she does. And finally, for the islands, we have Yakigashi Island, who's governed by the Minister of Browned Food Oven, who is the last member of the Katakuri triplet setup. Yakigashi means baked goods in Japanese, so it's like, is that where they're, Oven's power is that he can, has the netsu no mi, like that heat power, so he could like bake stuff very easily, but it's just like, is that part of what he's in charge of? Is there something else that he's in charge of in that regard? Like, you can't have a whole island where that's just what they do is bake stuff, but it's just like, is he just in charge of like baking stuff? I don't know. That seems like it falls under the purview of a different island, but I don't know. I don't know. That doesn't make sense to me, but whatever. A few other little bits here to go over. So we know that in regards to helping like protect the perimeter of Totland and even within Totland themselves, they have the tart ships that are designed to go around, and they are generally manned by the different chess piece keepers, and they work in tandem with the territorial sea slugs that are designed to let the Big Mom pirates know if anything or anyone enters the territory that's not supposed to be there. We also see the territorial slugs get very easily interrupted and kind of, taken care of by Praline when she sings to them and just like kind of knocks them all out or whatever, so they can't, be the radar system that they need to be. And the tart ships look kind of fun. We know that Beiji and his crew steal one when they're leaving Totland, I believe. And that's how they get out of Totland. Let's see. I wanted to point out the chess soldiers. Or the chess peacekeepers, as they're called in the Funimation dub, which I like that double entendre there, because it's like chess piece as in like they're like a chess piece, but it's also chess piece as in like the one piece, but it's also chess piece as in like peace as in like keeping the peace. So I love that like triple entendre there that's going on there, that triple wordplay that can be done there. So they have the chess peacekeepers, who are designed to themed after different chess pieces, obviously, and depending on like what rank they are, they are able to hold various positions or have various amounts of like what they're allowed to do. Like the pawns are generally in charge of the tart chips. We see Pecoms interacting with one of them at some point when they first show up. We see that the lower ranks tend to just be in charge of like security and stuff. We see that the queen ranks have higher authority and that they're in charge of ordering other soldiers around. I think we see some of them during when Brooke is fighting in the treasure vault. I think we see some of them there, and Brooke, I know, fights a whole bunch of them, and he's able to use his soul powers to, you know, take the homie souls out of them. And then we have the king ranked peacekeepers, who they are they report directly to Mama herself, and they are also in charge of protecting Mother Caramel's portrait and like carrying it out during the tea parties. So that's mostly what we get to see with them. Not too much there with that. You know, they have the biscuit soldiers that are made by Cracker and then animated and turned into homies by Big Mom. So they have those that roam around, that are in charge of, you know, just keeping everything in line and everything, keeping the citizens in line, making sure that different things like that. And so one of the funny things I wanted to point out here is that Totland does have like a police force, because we see like a police officer try to like arrest Luffy and Chopper for snackalism, which is of private property, which is, i.e., eating parts of buildings illegally. I love that. I love that joke. I don't know why, but I love that joke, because it's when Chopper and Luffy are trying to devour like the cafe that Pudding made, and they show like they're just like sitting there so stuffed, and the police officer comes over and just starts berating them and trying to write them up, and then Pudding shows up and like saves them, and it's just like I'm writing you up for snackalism. I'm like, okay. And the other side of that is that we know that so many of the different buildings throughout Totland are made of food. And Pecoms actually gives us a little bit of the lay of the land in this, where he's like, the complex matter for like the jurisdictions of like how different structures are made within the islands. Like buildings fall under this area and different types of food. And then, but like windows are part of this and roofing is part of this and like different things like that, for like this whole complexity of like being able to set all this up, which I would assume, given the number of times that Big Mom has probably gone on her hunger rampages, on her hunger pain rampages, that these different, bureaucracy systems that are designed here probably actually work quite well together, because they're designed that way so they can be like, they may have like a whole bunch of stuff on, ready for like different islands based on like, okay, Mama went on a rampage on this island, like, okay, we got to get Sweet City all built back up again and taken care of before everything happens and before the Vin Smokes show up for the wedding, so we don't look like we're, in a disarray or something like that. And like then they like fix up Sweet City really quickly because they have so many things already on hand that are just like, new walls and windows and roofing tiles and different stuff like that, all set and ready. And then like they set like the peacekeepers out or whatever to do all the constructions maybe. Hi, are you itching your head? I'm almost finished. I love you. So, that's like a way of doing that. So I like that concept. And also I love the fact that it's like a crime to try to eat the house. The Pudding kind of like loops her way through it and like lets them eat it, which is just kind of funny. I would eat sweets and stuff like that from Pudding. She seems very well done with it. She seems very accomplished in that situation. And then last bit is, I did want to point out, obviously, and I pointed this out a little bit at the beginning in regards to like how Big Mom's dream works in regards to the inhabitants of Totland. So, for the inhabitants of Totland, we see pretty much all of the races, except for giants, the sky races, in regards to like the, we don't see the Lunarians either, but we don't see like the Skypeans and the Bjerkins and the Shandians. We don't see any of them, and as far as we're aware, we don't see any Buccaneers. There's the whole theory that Big Mom herself may have Buccaneer in her, but we don't know because it's never stated one way or the other. And as far as we're aware, she's never had a blood test or a DNA test done or anything like that. But pretty much all the other races are depicted there in some shape or form, with humans, fishmen, merfolk, minks, snake necks, long arms, long legs, dwarves, and three-eyed tribes. Even though Pudding's the only one that we see, and she's only a hybrid. And then various other hybrids of these different races, depending on stuff. Throughout the course of, the arc. And this is, of course, a representation of the dream that Big Mom has had. And while it is illegal to discriminate against someone because of their race, people within Totland still find reasons to discriminate against people based on just whatever the heck else they can come up with. Like when they would make fun of like Katakuri with his mouth or different things like that. Or Pudding because of her third eye. And different things along those lines. The other thing is that, strangely, even though the living objects such as furniture and ships and food and such like that, who are homies that were brought to life, as well as the different types of talking animals, not including the minks, or zone fruit users in regards to, like, Baron Tamago. I was trying to think, I don't think any of Big Mom's children themselves have a Zoan type fruit. They're all Paramecia. Well, no, Katakuri is a special Paramecia, but you get the idea. All of them are Paramecia. None of them are Logia, as far as I'm aware, and I don't think any of them are, the only member of the Big Mom Pirates crew who I know is at least a confirmed Zoan fruit user, as far as I can remember, is Baron Tamago. Peckham's too, because he has, like, the turtle devil fruit, but that's, Tamago has, like, the egg devil fruit. Or the chicken devil fruit, whatever it is. And then Peckham's has, like, the turtle devil fruit. So you can turn into that. But, like, those are the only two, and neither of them are actually Big Mom's children. So I don't know. All of her children have, like, some type of a fruit setup, or a food setup for the most part, minus Pudding and Poulet, who don't have food-based Paramecia. And, well, several of the others don't either, I guess. So that logic goes down the drain. But, so a lot of the other things that are homies don't really have equal rights or anything like that. They're just considered living objects. They're not considered like they're actually fully alive. Because, we see them eating the homies. We see them eating, she eats the talking croquembouche, and we see her, serving the Vinsmokes, like, talking pancakes and stuff like that, and they get eaten there and everything like that as amusement. And, like, the talking animals are just, like, amusing. Like, there's Randolph, who's, like, the bunny fighter in the Seducing Woods, and there's also, like, the talking crocodile and the crane, and several other ones that are just there that are meant to be like these whimsical things that are in charge, or whimsical things to be like, oh, there's talking animals here, but they're not minks, because, like, they can't use electro like Carrot can, or that type of a thing, as she points out. And just, like, show you, like, the range of what her soul fruit can do and how it's affected the islands. And the fact that, like, so many of the islands have, like, these huge homies on them that are, like, able to talk and interact with people. And I mean, like, some of that would be kind of interesting. Like, I would like to talk to my oven so I can make sure that it lets me know when the thing I'm baking inside of it or cooking inside of it is done, and I can take it out. As opposed to just setting a timer and I can sit and talk with the oven while everything's going on. Or different things like that would be, like, interesting ways of doing it. Like, Pudding has her, like, her rug that she can talk to, and has a flying carpet as a reference to Aladdin, and she has, like, the Nitro, who's, like, the jelly slime thing, and stuff like that. Like, Brulee interacts with a bunch of the different homies that are part of, like, the forest and stuff like that. The Seducing Woods, and, like, so many different other things like that. So there's a bunch of stuff that goes on there. So we also know that there are a few others that are not necessarily considered people within the Totland setup. There are the, I'm going to mispronounce this and I apologize, the Kinokobito, who are the little tiny like mushroom type people that are being held in the prison library. That one of them is held within one of like her like prison library books or whatever, where they're like a species on display. And there's also like a long-limbed human that is a hybrid of the long leg and the long arm tribe. Um, that Big Mom does not consider them humans. She does not consider them real or like living people, or well, they're considered alive, but she doesn't consider them like equal, and she like has them as like a display piece type of a thing. And that's those ones there. For what she has there, she also has like a bunch of other of the animals pinned into the books and other people pinned into the books, like happens with like Luffy and Nami and stuff like that when they're in the prison library. But that's about it for what I wanted to go over for this for Totland, in regards to the layout and government and history and stuff like that. I know I bounced around a little bit here and there, but I'm sorry. That's what I have for this. I will have the other videos where I talk about like several of her different children and stuff like that, and I'm just going to go in birth order for the ones that I am going to talk about. So that's what I have for this. I thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I know it ended up being longer than I wanted. Sorry, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.